All right, I think we're going to get started. So welcome everyone to another Twitter Spaces. Today, we're going to talk about whether we should be bullish or bearish on Bitcoin. And I invited some of my friends, some of the most influential people here with me to discuss this. Of course, I'm going to go down the list and kind of introduce everyone. We do have Brian Evans, who I've participated in many spaces with. He's here. Also, Layah. Layah is a judge with me and Brian from the next Crypto Gem, but obviously she has a lot to say about what's going on with Bitcoin and everything else. Also, we have Wendy O, who will be attending. Hopefully, she can come soon. Jason Appleton, Crypto Crow. Hopefully, he will be joining. But also, we have Crypto Zombie. Also, someone that I've met down in Miami today. We've known each other, I think, for a while, but never really met. I invited him to talk about his basically about Bitcoin. Also, we got Tom Crown, who is someone in the space as well. TA guy, and also we got Sam CryptoLifer, also TA guy. I'm not a big techno analysis guy, but I want to get their thoughts too on whether or not we should be bullish or bearish on Bitcoin. And then we also have Mikhail from Certic too, who's a regular. So welcome everyone. I'm really glad you're all able to join me today.
Great to be here.
Thank you so much, man.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. I mean, hey, I know it's a large crowd, so hey, anyone that's a speaker, feel free to jump in. I only have a few topics, but since there's so many people here, so just feel free to jump in anytime you want. But you know what? Let's start out with what's going on with Bitcoin. Obviously, Bitcoin has dipped a little bit. It seems like every time we approach this Bitcoin conference, and then afterwards we have some volatility and have come down. But also right now, obviously, there's a lot of macro stuff that's happening. One that everyone's focused on, especially if you're in the U.S., is the debt ceiling. Do you guys feel that the debt ceiling is having an impact on Bitcoin? And if the debt ceiling gets raised, is that going to help Bitcoin and crypto overall, or do you feel like that has nothing to do with anything? Anyone want to kick this off?
Yeah, I'll kick it off if you want.
Go ahead.
I did a bunch of live streams today, staring at the charts for hours. Thank you so much for having me. It was so nice meeting you, man. You're such a gentleman. Really good time hanging out with you at SLS that night. So, what I look at is moving averages. I like simple moving averages. I'm not as much as an EMA guy. I'm more of an SMA guy, and that's if everyone knows EMAs. The difference between an SMA and an EMA is that EMA takes more into account of the recent days. But an SMA just like if it's a 21 simple moving average, it just divides all when the day ends, and it divides it by 21. If anyone, so the weekly right now is above the 200 SMA. That's a beautiful sign. It's actually right on it right now. We go below that. We close a weekly candle below that. That's going to make me want to short further down. We do have a CME gap at 20,800. We do know that 95% of the CME gaps do get filled. I'm not a proponent that every single time they have to be filled. I just stick with the TA at the time. We're also in like a falling wedge in the weekly, which 68% of the time breaks to the upside, and we're getting tighter in that wedge. So just the simple macro idea on the weekly there is stay above the 200 SMA, and there's a 68% chance that we're breaking up, and that could take us back to about like 38,000, really into the 40K range. The debt ceiling question, I believe they're going to raise the debt ceiling, but when they do that, I think they're going to have to print money. Where's that money going to come from? And when they print money and the money printer goes brrr, Bitcoin likes to pump. I mean, that's going to probably lower the dollar's value. The DXY is pumping a little bit too, which I always kind of juxtapose it. But Bitcoin and the DXY can pump at the same time, as the DXY is connected to a basket of other currencies throughout the world. We have BRICS coming in too. It's funny, I was at a conference in the UN 12 years ago, and someone handed me a BRICS pamphlet and explained to me what it was. I kept that pamphlet for years, and now I see this coming out 2-3 years later, and it's funny, it was like a premonition of this was going to be something big later on in life. What BRICS is going to do is, you have Russia could be settling oil in Bitcoin too, right? Russia and China may be doing oil deals with Bitcoin. That could create some more movement for Bitcoin. So the 4-hour is below the 200 SMA. We got to get above that. That's the first step. And we can't lose the 200 SMA. There's also a weekly bullish divergence. I've been saying this for, I don't know, since we saw it about 3 to 4 months ago, mainly. As long as that to me, that's huge. I was able to call a top on Bitcoin for a bearish weekly divergence. This is a bullish divergence on the weekly. Very rare that any asset in the world will go lower than a divergence on the weekly. So that's kind of my spiel. Keep it as short as I can. And thank you so much for letting me jump on in and start it off.
I'll jump in. George,
Yeah, go ahead.
this. Thanks so much for having me. It was so great hanging out with you in Miami, and it was great meeting everyone. I think I actually met Crypto Zombie as well. Sam, it was nice to meet you too. Good seeing you, Brian. So I feel like this Spaces is just coming at such an important time. Because as always, like you said, there's always the crash every time. We have the Bitcoin conference. So, I think in terms of raising the debt ceiling, very similar to Sam, all forms of incompetence from the government, I think, is bullish for Bitcoin. Like Sam said, they'll have to print more money. Where does that money go? Well, we saw, over the last few years, a lot of that money went into the crypto market, went into Bitcoin. So I think it is going to be good for Bitcoin. However, that wouldn't be the reason why I'm bullish or bearish. Right now, I'm kind of neither. I'm not bearish and I'm not massively bullish in the short term. I feel like with the halving coming, in just under a year, naturally we're going to start gaining more momentum as we've done. Obviously, I think we've had the lows that we saw at $16,000. But I just feel like we're going to move sideways for the rest of this year unless there's a huge black swan event. Then of course I expect a crash, but overall I think we're going to move sideways for the rest of this year until the halving next year, and then I think we're more likely to start to see Bitcoin approach $40,000. But otherwise, neither bearish or bullish, to be honest. Very, very neutral right now on Bitcoin.
So, Layah, real quick. So, do you think so? Based on what you said, basically, you think we're following the 4-year cycle, but something like the debt ceiling and macro stuff like this, that's kind of scaring the markets, really have nothing to do with it.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, any form of black swan event, I think, can crash the
Mm-hmm.
market, like we saw with COVID in 2020. But the debt ceiling, I don't feel like that would be bad for Bitcoin at this point.
Mm.
So I actually wanted to butt in and just say, by the way, Layah, nice meeting you. And of course, had great fun in Miami. George, everybody. I agree with everything that Sam said, by the way, so I'm not even going to touch the TA because we were just going over moving averages today on the channel. So I pretty much am in line with that. I do think that short term, we may be a little bit overbought. I could see us going back, at least retesting that $25,300 area, but I'm not going to talk too much about that. As far as the question with the debt ceiling, I think something that I've noticed in crypto, because I've been in it for, 7+ years now, I'm noticing that, these big powers at play that you think have this big influence, a lot of guys in the US stock market, they're like, well, it's correlated. And if this happens in the US, then Bitcoin is going to crash. But I think we've started to kind of realize that Bitcoin doesn't really care as much as time passes by. And, you have to kind of get out of that Western mindset. I mean, there's so much crypto trading and so much crypto building that's happening, unfortunately, offshore United States because of the regulatory uncertainty. And, China banned Bitcoin, literally banned it, banned the mining, banned cryptocurrencies, and we still went to 70,000. And we didn't have any of those 1.8 billion people over in China. And I think that the US does tend to get kind of cocky and assume that everything that we do, has the ultimate effect on the world. But as you've seen, we put those sanctions in Russia. We basically showed everyone, hey, we're going to weaponize the dollar now. And what message did that send to the world? So I think because of things like the internet, like Web3, the connectiveness of the world, the fast pacedness of the world right now, I find that as time passes on, these old ways of worrying about the CPI data and worrying about this, sure, it may be affected short term. Stocks dump, Bitcoin may have that risk move with it. But I think that we're starting to get into that next paradigm where you are seeing people finally realizing Bitcoin as that sort of safe haven hedge. And this is something a few years ago you would laugh at. But I mean, we're having literally bank runs. Banks are collapsing and Bitcoin is holding steady. So I just feel like we are entering that new paradigm, and I worry less and less about really what happens in the US. I'm from the US, but I don't really concern myself too much. I think the rest of the world is figuring it out slowly. So that's kind of like my take on it.
Hey, don't want to
Hey,
interrupt you, Kyle. Wendy's here. Can we invite her up? I don't know if Twitter Space is being buggy since Elon did his huge space.
Well, I don't know how to do that.
I'm trying to find her, and I don't see her in my list. Someone told me that too. I don't see her in my list. I don't see Wendy.
I can see Wendy, guys, but I don't have permission to add her. I don't know how to
Yeah.
do that.
How about you add like me or Kyle or someone, and we probably can do it as a co-host.
You know what? I'm gonna try to add Brian here. Brian, I tried to add a co-host earlier, and it just wouldn't go. So I don't know why. Maybe because I'm on Android. Android Spaces. Android Twitter seems to be very lacking. I still don't see her.
if you click on me, it should give you the option to do co-host.
Yeah, I did. So yeah, I done this with Josh, with several others. No one seems to be able to get my co-host invite.
Mm.
Here, I'm gonna try it again. Wendy, if you're in here, can you just request to speak, because I should be able to see you if you do that.
Yeah, I think if you just, there's a little request button, you just tap it, and then it should allow
Yeah,
George
I
to
should be able
let you
to.
in.
Sorry everyone
By the
for
way,
technical difficulties.
in the meantime, on this topic, one thing I was
Mhm.
going to say too is I just kind of see all this as a giant sales pitch for crypto and Bitcoin. Like when all these banks have these issues and the U.S. can't get their shit together, regulators can't get their stuff together. To me, it's just a reason to be more bullish on crypto. I know it sucks in the short term in some ways, and the public narrative can be a little scary, and people want to pull out of things. But even right now, like Bitcoin is not down that much. It's down a little bit, so it's not even scaring people that much out of crypto. So
Right.
I don't know. I'm still very bullish.
Yeah, another thing too is I actually was on Reddit, and I'm starting to notice these not capitulation posts, but like I feel like crypto's dead. I'm bored with it. There's no way to make money. It's not doing anything. I'm gonna pull my money out and go into traditional stocks. And I find that usually it's not really the fear, like the crazy capitulation. It's actually when you start to get this complacency with people just being bored, like, why isn't it moving? What's going on? It's never going to be like it was. And usually when you see people kind of getting bored and ignoring it, that actually sends a signal to me that like maybe we should start paying attention now, because that's usually when the smart money is, loading up. I mean, if you look at some of the accumulations lately, you see a lot of whales right now sitting in stable coins. They're not cashing it out. They're actually sitting in it. And you've also seen some of the bigger, larger whale wallets starting to accumulate again. So this is telling me that they might be anticipating that crash, like you said, Lifer, down to 20K to fill, whatever gap. But I think they're getting ready, like they're filling up their bags, and I think that we are going to see a bigger price move. And I think by the end of this year, I wouldn't be surprised if Bitcoin is actually back above 30,000 again, but I wouldn't be surprised to see maybe a small dip before that. I think that would be the most likely scenario.
Why do you guys think, real quick, based on what you guys have said, why do you think Bitcoin has become so strong? I mean, yes, there's volatility, but we're still, despite everything that's going on, we're still at 26,000. Well, how is Bitcoin so much stronger now versus, like, let's say, the last cycle?
I think I think one of the things we're seeing in crypto, and we're also seeing it in tech stocks too, is there's this move from lower liquidity assets and like basically higher risk assets like altcoins to the blue chips. So like think like Bitcoin and Ethereum. You're also seeing the same thing take place in the stock market as well. Like a lot of liquidity is it's flowed away from the lower caps and into things like Apple and Nvidia and Google and Meta. So I think what a lot of people are doing is what they're essentially flocking to the relative safety of what they consider to be the blue chips within the space that they're interested in, and that liquidity from those lower risk plays have helped have helped a lot, like the blue chips of the space. And George, just to quickly before we get too far, I did want to say one more thing about the last question you asked with regards to the debt ceiling. one thing that I think could be something to think about is that because the debt ceiling, because it hasn't been raised in a while, the TGA has been getting drained for a long time. And because of that, that's actually been adding liquidity to the system for months and months and months because they've been draining the TGA, the Treasury General account. Once the debt ceiling is raised, then then they'll be able to refill the TGA, and in fact, they would likely do so very quickly, which could remove $600 or $700 billion of liquidity from the system very quickly. So that is a short term headwind that we have to get past. And I mean, my general opinion this year is normally the pre halving years are pretty boring, right? They're half up, half down, and everyone loses interest and moves on.
Yeah, that's a really good point. But Ben, by the way, I just want to thank you for the invite. And I think most of us here that were in Miami recently. Ben, your party's a killer, a killer. So thank you for that invite. And I created a video. I think many others have shared videos about your party. I just want to thank you for that. But you said about debt ceiling not being raised in a while. I checked. Last time was like 2021, so it's only been like 2 years. So it seems like U.S. And I don't know when it was upped prior to 2021, but it seems like we're running at this pace now where every 2 years we're running into this debt ceiling problem. I mean, this can't be a sustainable thing. U.S. can't be it seems like it's so irresponsible for the U.S. to need to raise the debt ceiling by a couple trillion every few years now. There's something inherently wrong, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not defending what they're doing.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that I mean, because of that, the fact that they've drained the TGA over the last several months, it has helped to temporarily offset some of the QT that the Federal Reserve has been doing. But once the debt ceiling is raised, then the TGA can be refilled. And if they're just going to like issue T-bills or something, that will drain liquidity from the system. And then you have the Fed, going through QT, they're rolling off assets from the balance sheet. And if you have the TGA being refilled, that could be sort of two areas where you're seeing liquidity being removed from the system. But again, I mean, it's not to say that Bitcoin, can't push. My general opinion on Bitcoin is that if it's going to push higher this year, it probably needs to do so relatively soon because I kind of think we could see something very similar to 2019, right, where it kind of fades the last half of the year, and then we sort of gear up for the real run, which normally comes, after the halving.
I just contrary idea there is, they do issue T-bills and that does drain the liquidity, but American debt is not looking so sexy anymore. You know what I mean? It's like, I think less people are going to want to be buying up American debt and they're going to want to be looking for alternatives. Like you guys said, I mean, it's like a bloody cut. You keep putting a Band-Aid on that just gets open and further. Every time they print more money and raise the debt ceiling, they're going to have to raise the debt ceiling even higher and print even more money. Like every time it's a snake biting it. It's an unending loop, right? And like, I love how everyone gets into Bitcoin and cryptocurrency differently. Me, I was talking about inflation in 2010. I started buying gold bars and silver bars. Then I started trading gold and silver. Then I found Bitcoin. I was like, oh, I don't have to lug a bag of gold and silver around in Armageddon. Like I could just remember 12 words, or 24. And so when I looked at that and realized, wow, the world is going to figure this out just like I did, and everyone's just going to keep catching up and keep catching up. And like Crypto Zombie saying, this isn't just a U.S. Asset, right? The whole world is looking at Bitcoin. And you have countries, remember, Bitcoin hit 100K already, remember, in Turkey, I believe, right? In the Turkish lira, like in other countries, they've devalued the currency beyond belief. I go to this website, the Fiat Currency Graveyard, and I preach it every day. Today, I was showing how the actual financial system works and how, fractional reserve lending, how, they sell our debt at the open market system. The same banks that buy the debt sell it to the Federal Reserve. And those are the same banks that actually own the Federal Reserve and gain a 6% dividend. It's a vicious cycle. I believe the only way out is truly getting into something. Even interviewing Vivek Ramaswamy at the event, and he was saying, we need to bring back the dollar to a gold standard, like to some type of real commodity where it's just not floating around. I do agree with what you're saying, because once they drain that, they put more money in that account, they're like, oh, it'll be more attractive to buy T-bills or to get into government debt. But I just feel like rest of the world is going to want it. Now, China is also hoarding gold like you wouldn't believe. I believe they're going to turn a switch on. Next thing you know, you could see gold $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 an ounce in 4 to 5 years or less. So that just kind of has me hedged more into the Bitcoin and ordinals. You know, the ordinals, the new space, there's a lot of new things happening that I have never seen happen before in like a pre-having bear market, quote unquote. The ordinals coming out. And even I'm not saying I'm a huge Hex supporter or, but I did sacrifice, and Hex and Pulse Chain created a good buzz,
And
the meme coins are
let's not
amazing, but
let us not talk about Pulse Chain and Hex in here, okay?
yeah, no, I'm not a fan of it. I'm just saying it exists. It's an existing thing that gets people to talk more about a bear market than just sitting there and being flat. You know what I mean? That's all.
Well, getting back to what you said about like diversification and looking at gold, I mean, it's pretty bad when you have Nicolas, what is his name, Maduro from Venezuela coming out and saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't use the dollar. I mean, you're talking about a country that had what, like 1,000,000% inflation or something like that. So yeah, I think a lot of people are waking up to it, and like just Bitcoin specifically, I think it's just sort of that ultimate neutral. I mean, you have Robert F. Kennedy Jr., talking about how it, stands for freedom and everything else. It's like you're just slowly seeing everybody wake up to how bad the real system is. It's funny because I'm over here. I don't know if you guys know, I've been trying to buy a house and all this stuff. I just closed on it. But you got to see, like, they basically treat you like a criminal when you deal with crypto. It's ridiculous. And the funniest thing about it is I have a wallet with USDC in it, right? Those are actual tokens. And when I send them to you, you actually physically receive those tokens. To me, that's more real than the money in the bank, which they're considering to be the real money. I mean, if my bank told me, if my bank said I had $300,000, do I really? If I went to go try to pull that money out, is it really there? But if I have 300 grand, for the down payment in USDC, those are actual tokens that are actually backed by something in a bank. They tried to blame crypto on the collapse, but it was them. They were the ones that couldn't handle the bank run when the people on USDC were trying to cash out to the banks. So the way the media twists it into crypto is a better solution than what the banks are doing. And Bitcoin is a better solution than fiat. And I think it's just that's exactly like what people are waking up to right now. Side note, though, if history did repeat, just so you guys know, when they did, the debt crisis that we had, the really bad one in 2011, the markets did dump 17% in 5 days. So I don't know if that would affect crypto as well, but it's just kind of worth noting.
Well,
Going back. Oh, go for it, Leah.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, given everything that we've spoken about, and you mentioned Venezuela, I think the more incompetent governments behave, but it's not just incompetency, but it's like the more they push, the more they freeze bank accounts, the more things collapse, the more the traditional system is collapsing, the more Bitcoin is going to rise because people understand the demand for it. We ask ourselves, why is Bitcoin at $26,000 at this cycle and it's a lot stronger than it was in the previous market? Well, I think the need for it is becoming so much more obvious. People were trying to protest for their freedom and they had their bank accounts shut down. We've seen banks collapse and so on and so on. And so the more the traditional system just crumbles, I think the more the demand for it is. And then on top of that, kind of just going off what Benjamin was saying, it's so interesting because as we've seen all of these companies go bankrupt in the crypto space, as we've seen, USDC depeg, people do run to Bitcoin. They do run to Ethereum. They do run to these assets as these blue chip assets. Because I know so many people during the when USDC depegged, they ran to Bitcoin because where else are they going to put their money? And so not only are we seeing it as a safe haven from the traditional system, but I think people are now seeing Bitcoin as a safe haven from the rest of the crypto market, when times are bad. So to me, it's kind of obvious that Bitcoin is behaving in this way.
Just to keep ourselves honest here, I mean, so at this point in 2019, Bitcoin was up more year to date. So, I mean, it's not, it certainly seems like it's strong because it's been showing strength relative to the rest of the market recently, which I think is the general expectation of the pre-halving year. But in 2019, Bitcoin went up like about 4x by the end of June. And if Bitcoin were tracking what it was doing in 2019, it should already be, 31, 32K. So, I mean, it's not necessarily any stronger, relatively speaking, than it was back in 2019. I mean, I think a lot of us kind of forget just how much Bitcoin pumped in the first half of 2019.
I think the conditions were different too, Ben. You know, it was a lot easier to just sort of YOLO and every you know what I mean at that time after COVID hit, and then we had that. But yeah, I agree with you. I agree. But it's like I think Gareth Soloway, he always says Bitcoin's like a teenager, right? It's like 15 years old. When you're 15 years old, you're just getting your learner's permit. You're still kind of making mistakes, right? It's in its teenage years, but it definitely is evolving. I would say.
But I'd also just add with those pumps, you also see those crazy pullbacks. And so obviously we're yet to see how Bitcoin behaves. We're yet to see how low it's going to go this year. But maybe it went to $30,000. Maybe it doesn't drop much lower than what it is right now. Only time will tell. But I think, yes, like you were saying, Bitcoin is a teenager, and the older it gets, the more stable perhaps it will behave, which I would regard as stronger.
And big pumps lead to big dumps. I'd rather a gradual, slow climb,
Exactly.
kind of like we're doing now. 19 to 30, come back down to 25, test some regions, and let it just slowly build up closer. I don't want it to do what it did in 2019. I'd rather more of a gradual, slow pump into the halving.
And that stability to me is a sign of strength and a sign of maturity compared to 2019 personally.
Well, I, on the other hand, do want it to go straight up.
Don't we all?
I'm not done accumulating yet. Chill.
Well, it definitely has become more stable. Our upside from the previous, all-time high, 20K to 69 is like 3.5 times. You compare that to the previous cycle, 1K to 20K, and now maybe 15.5 is the bottom. That's a smaller retracement. I mean, that would imply less macro volatility if the bottom's in.
Well, let's turn to something that could be bullish. At least I think so. And that's also coming June 1st. And I'm not talking about the debt ceiling. I'm talking about how Hong Kong is opening up crypto trading for its citizens and possibly also allowing mainland institutions to invest in Bitcoin, Ethereum, and I think there was a list of like 6 different crypto, Chainlink, Polygon, Avalanche, and a few others. So do you guys feel like this is a legit catalyst that can drive billions or trillions into the space? Or do you guys also feel like this is not a big deal?
Absolutely. Absolutely could be a huge catalyst. It kind of feels like China just had like a high IQ game here. We're gonna ban it, we're gonna ban it, we're gonna ban it. And then as soon as the US starts getting kind of on the case, all of a sudden, actually, we're just gonna allow Hong Kong and whatever to get in on it. It's kind of embarrassing.
Did you guys see that tweet from CZ where he showed that they had broadcasted on the news they were talking about Hong Kong and crypto? And he said it's a really big deal because even though, yes, Hong Kong is technically the financial district, the fact that China Central Television even mentioned it, even showed the Bitcoin logo, and then they were talking about NFTs, that's kind of got people, he says it's got the community buzzing. And I don't know if you saw this news, but something even weirder, and I'm going to definitely pronounce this wrong, but the capital city of China's, it's Zhuansung, whatever province, I don't know how to say it. They launched a new government-backed metaverse platform. They're basically launching a metaverse platform. So it's funny how first it's totally banned, then we're going to test the waters with Hong Kong, and now we're going to launch a metaverse platform. Like it seems again like everybody eventually just comes around to it. I don't know. It just seems like maybe they will change their stance on it. Who knows? I'm not trying to get opium. But
They're just unbanning it so they can ban it again in a couple of years.
yeah, the same reason that the same reason that the Fed raises rates so that when what hits the fan, they have something to cut. Is that kind of like what we're doing? So,
well, China's also been getting their citizens to hoard gold. They're hoarding more gold. They say that there's 30 tons, and some say it's maybe up to 40 tons of gold. So they want to, they want a weak dollar. They want a stronger yen. So anything that would compromise the dollar. So they're definitely going to push people back into Bitcoin. I'm super excited. I'm looking at CFX and some other coins that are coming up. I'm super excited to see what's going to happen next week. And I think we get a little bit of some good swing trades that could actually give us some more liquidity back to the market and get people more excited, more tweets, more trends. I'm excited for it for sure.
I'll also add that, when I go to these conferences like Consensus, Misari Mainnet, there's a lot of family offices and they're just curious, but more importantly, they're just waiting to deploy capital. I mean, it's just they are super aggressive.
Okay. I mean, I think it's just I think it's gonna be huge. I think there's so much money in China. You know, when you do business in China, you know that they have a very closed door policy, right? They want their own to invest in their own, which is why they have their own social media, they have their own tech giants, they have everything, right? But I think Sam is onto something because if they allow their citizens to invest in crypto and not just specifically like Chinese-based crypto companies, right? There's something to it. I think there's going to be a massive amount of money, first of all, that's going to be flowing in. But second of all, I think Sam is right that it's probably part of the agenda to destabilize the dollar, which we're already starting to see. We see countries now like Brazil and even I think even a lot of countries in Latin America and others in the Middle East and I think even Japan started buying oil from Russia and they're not using the USD either. I think you're starting to see the USD starting to stabilize, and I'm wondering if this has something to do with that, even though it's very early. But I'm just wondering if this is part of like their overall agenda to take down the USD as a world reserve currency.
Well, the transition to another reserve currency would probably take decades if it's even going to happen. And
I think they've been doing it behind the scenes though, and you're going to see it happen fast. They've been working on this for 30 years. Like I'm telling you, I got a BRICS pamphlet 12 years ago.
Yeah, but I don't think China, I mean, if they made a basket of currencies, I could see that. But, like you said, China is very like intranet, not, you know what I mean? So, like, would they even want their currency to be the world currency? I mean, is that even something they would truly, really want? Or would they just want to keep it inside and then maybe create this sort of basket, like you guys said, in the BRICS? I could see something maybe like that. But I don't know if necessarily China would want. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I don't understand the whole situation, but I just never really saw China in that sense. Like like you said, they have their own ecosystem. They kind of don't want to really get outside of that bubble, you know?
Yeah, I don't know if they want their yuan to be the reserve currency. So yeah, I'm not smart enough to comment on that, but I do think they've been working on this for quite some time. Um, let's talk about something controversial, and I think Leia can really speak to this. Let's talk about what's going on with Ledger. I think all of us have heard about Ledger, their plans for their recovery service that they want to implement on their Nano X and S Plus, and their CEO also got, I don't know if you call it got caught, but he also said that yeah, with this service, if you opt in or even if you don't opt in, I think if we get subpoenaed by any government, now we have to send your private key to them. So overall, Ledger seems to be really digging themselves a big hole in the ground, and they keep digging, and they're not backtracking. So, what do you guys think about Ledger and what they have done? Do you think this is obviously good or bad, or and what other wallets are you guys looking at now?
Sure, happy to speak to that. Yeah, I mean, I don't think any form of recovery solution is a good idea, personally. If you'd like to have a recovery solution, go use an exchange. That's the way I look at it. I don't like it. I think also it's quite concerning for the crypto space in general because, we have this idea of hot wallet, cold wallet, custodial versus non-custodial, and obviously Ledger fits into that non-custodial wallet um bracket. But now it gets a little bit confusing because it's like, well, actually, they're offering this recovery service, and now, as you said, was it the CEO? He said that if they get
Yeah.
subpoenaed by the government, then they'd have to give up that information. So now it gets even more confusing for newbies. So I think we have to speak up about this, make that distinction extremely clear. I personally don't like that. I think the point of crypto, I think the point of Bitcoin is to take self-custody and to be sovereign and to not allow governments the ability or anyone the ability to access your funds. In terms of what I recommend, I use so many different ones. And I'm not going to speak to the ones that I use. But one thing that I did read today, don't know if anyone else read this, but actually something about Trezor. I'm going to get it up right now. Um, Here we go. Crypto security firm claims the ability to physically hack the Trezor T wallet. So I would recommend doing your research and going for the most secure on the market. You know, I don't want to speak badly on any of them, but there are a lot of concerns with the leading and industry standard wallet. So I would recommend people doing a lot of extra research.
I can
It's
see
like
why they did it, you know, because I was talking to a friend at a different company, and he was saying the number one support inquiry they have is lost seed phrase. So I can see why they did it for, you know, imagine adoption, imagine hundreds of millions of people, you know, coming into this more, with the same existing set of technology we have now. There's going to be lots of issues. I'm not for it either, but I can see why they would have thought that. But just clearly that wasn't the solution in my mind. And I know they've walked it back now and said, no, you know, apparently you're going to have two separate paths and you don't have to use the features, but we'll have to see how that actually plays out. You know, is that really the case? We're going to have to look into that. But I do see why they would have thought to do that. But obviously the whole government, you know, subpoena and all that, you know, is not going to be good. That kind of defeats the whole purpose. Like I said, just keep it on an exchange if you're going to do that. So yeah, it's a tough one though.
When did Ledger hire their PR team like off Fiverr? Like when did that migration happen? Is my question. Did you guys hear about their next product? It's the Ledger G, and it's like a GPS product where they can just signal you from a satellite and find you. No, I just made that up, but it's not out of the realm. Do you guys remember they came out with like a Ledger chain, like wear it around your neck? Like what are they doing? The worst part
Yeah.
about this for me is
I
that it scared people. Like our keys aren't at risk that are sitting on a piece of paper somewhere. But new people thought, oh, Ledger's compromised, kind of similar to when their email database got hacked. Like it caused fear, and it just shows that they don't really maybe understand the space, or their new team doesn't. I still use my Ledger. It's fine. I'm not going to update the firmware. It's safe for good. But the idea is absolutely the antithesis of what crypto and Bitcoin is.
If you have the original Ledger Nano S, you should be all right. Because I don't even think this is even compatible with that, they said. So you should be all right. But, you know, Layah was talking about, you know, you need to stand up and push back. And that's kind of what the community did, which is why I feel like the CEO came out and they actually, if you saw, they're holding off now on rolling that out. And they are going to open source how the sharding and all that stuff works so that people can actually look into it so that you really truly understand what's going on the back end. But, you know, like you said, use a centralized exchange, or what they should have done seriously is just released a separate product on its own. I mean, why are you going to
100%.
infringe on the OGs? I mean, we have a wallet for the exact opposite of that reason. We understand that. If somebody doesn't, then make a new wallet for them, you know, Ledger Beginner or Ledger whatever. And, you know, then they can have that option. But don't have us, which have been trying to do the right thing and actually hold our own keys, all of a sudden we have to now update our firmware. It makes everyone very suspicious. And yeah, it even made me, you know, I've pushed Ledger for a long time. I love Ledger, but I've even started looking into other things like Engrave or just these other, you know, solutions totally air gapped, because the fact that Ledger won't even show people, you know, everything's open source except for the actual chip itself. Now, getting back to the point where Trezor is actually able to be physically hacked, that is because they did open source it. So I get it. You know, it's like two sides of the coin here, two sides of the knife, whatever. But at the same time, that lack of transparency is what's going to end up hurting their business so much. And they really just did not think this one through. It was just a terrible move. It was a good idea, but it was executed probably the worst you could have ever rolled something out.
Yeah, when the CEO has to roll back, you know, he has to come out and roll things back. It just looks absolutely horrible, right? And no one wants a backdoor. The whole point that we got into cryptocurrency was to be our own banks. And I get most people don't want to be their own banks, but that's that's what has to happen. Like, we need millions and millions, if not a billion people, to realize that the centralized banking system wasn't there for you and never was trying to be there for you. People don't realize when you open up a bank account, read the fine print, you're giving them a loan. Like, everyone thinks, oh, they're safely keeping my money. The second you put $100 in the bank, they can do one of two things. They can keep $10. You know, they'll say you have 100, but they can keep the actual 10 and give out 90 as a loan, or they can use your 100 as collateral for $1,000. Right? Fractional reserve lending. It's a horrible way to do business. Even the Glass-Steagall Act, right? How you're not supposed to be able to play with the money like they did. They reversed that. That's the first thing that should get reinstated, before all this nonsense. But yeah, we're supposed to be our own banks. We're supposed to protect our money. We're supposed to be responsible. The second you don't have responsible citizens and they're going to give up their freedom for security, they deserve neither, right? Benjamin Franklin.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I want to push back on the idea that people are incapable of learning how to take self-custody. I really hate that. I think it's kind of really undervaluing the average person. I think that when there's a need for something, people can learn very quickly. And it's a little bit like the internet back in the day when people laughed and they said, "Oh, how's everybody going to use this?" Well, now like grandmas are on the internet. And so people can learn how to do this, especially when they realize that they need to. And as I said at the beginning, I think that as the government begins to behave more tyrannical and the system begins to and continues to collapse even more and the money in their pocket continues to devalue, they will feel a need, they will feel an urgency to learn very quickly. And also, we live in this new digital world now. Children are literally growing up with crypto. Like you have 18-year-olds making millions on cryptocurrency. So like people are learning very, very fast. And so I think anybody can do it. And so I really push back on the idea that people just can't do it. I think everyone can learn eventually.
I asked my 8-year-old daughter,
There you go.
what's the difference between the bank and Bitcoin? She goes, well, with the bank, they can just lose your money and they could go down. But with Bitcoin, you're the only one that can lose your money. And I just laughed.
I think it's hilarious how there's been this huge movement about proof of reserves for crypto. Like we need to make sure that you have every single asset accounted for and the liabilities all lined up, whatever. But then your bank itself doesn't even actually have the money. Like and that's supposed to be the legitimate institution,
Yeah, there's two standards. There's one for the banks and there's one for crypto. You can have fractional reserves for banks. That's okay. And of course that's frowned upon in crypto. And that's because you have the FDIC and you have the Fed, you have everyone else that'll bail them out if they make a mistake. And no one goes to jail if they collapse either. Right? There's just a different standard for banks. It's a rigged system. It really is. But you know what? It's an uphill battle that Bitcoin, self-custody, decentralization, everything will eventually win, but it's just going to take a while, right? And I totally agree with Layah in terms of like self-custody wallet. Here's the frustrating thing. Like I have tens of thousands of people tuning in every single day, and if I had to guess, I bet more than 50% that's been listening to me for over probably 2, 3, 4 years still does not use a self-custody wallet because people are unfortunately they're creatures of habits. They learn from Coinbase and they think someone like Coinbase can never go down or never have problems, so they refuse to try it. That's the frustrating thing. I know there's just so many people that listen to me, even though I talk about, hey, get a hardware wallet or get a mobile wallet or a browser wallet, right? Learn how to safeguard your own crypto. There's just so many people that just refuse to do it until something happens, and that's the unfortunate thing
Hey man,
with many people.
when's the best time to buy a plunger? Is it when the toilet's overflowing? No, you're supposed to have the plunger there just in case the toilet overflows, right? And unfortunately, I think, and I'm guilty of this too. When I first got into crypto, trust me, I got scammed, I lost money, I did all this. I think you're right. It's like, trying to tell the boyfriend or the girlfriend, like, who's being mistreated, sometimes they just got to like go through it and kind of get hurt, unfortunately, before they learn. So, the best that we can do is try to educate. At the end of the day, you could lead a horse to water, but I think unfortunately, they'll lose money or an exchange will get hacked or something unfortunate will happen, and then that's when they will learn. And like Layah said, I do believe that people are capable. I just think that a lot of us get way too comfortable and we just get lazy because we're like, well, it's worked for so long and everything's been fine, But then one day the flood comes, and then you gotta learn.
I
So.
think I agree that people are capable of learning, but I think one reality that I think the crypto industry faces is that we need better solutions, right? We need easier access. We need things we can use, and it's not so scary. I mean, anyone can learn how to do anything, right? Like people can go learn how to code if they want to, but the reality is most people aren't going to go learn how to do that. And if it's not something they can figure out within a few seconds, it's probably not something they're going to spend that much time on. So I do think that as an industry, we do need better solutions. Obviously, the way things were handled recently is not rolled out in the best the best way, but um, I would like to see, I would like to see more, easier solutions come for people to help onboard people into the cryptoverse, rather than just saying like, well, just figure out how to use this 24-word phrase that you're probably going to lose next year, and then you're not going to have access anymore. Like that does turn a lot of people away. I mean, look, everyone here now in 2023, you're not a tourist, right? Like if you're on this Twitter space, you're not a tourist. You're in it for the long haul because you see the long-term value of Bitcoin, which I think is another reason why the way that it was this most recent thing with Ledger, their target audience for something like that would have been the audience that was here in 2025, right? Not the audience that's here in 2023, or the audience in say 2021. So it's all about timing. It's all about how do you launch the product. But I do think we need better solutions in crypto that are easier and a little bit more friendly to getting new people to join.
One of the problems too is some of these solutions just go back to centralization, as we're kind of talking about. I have heard of a few trying to make more decentralized recoveries and things like that. The problem with that is it's still a barrier to entry if people need to be sophisticated enough to be able to use them. So, us speaking here can use them, no problem, but maybe somebody's mom can't use them. So, yeah, it goes back to needing better solutions for sure.
And that barrier, if you guys probably remember your first Bitcoin wallet, looked nothing like, I don't know, just Atomic Wallet or something. Like, it has come a long way. Benjamin's totally on point, though. Like, I mean, it's going to keep happening, but it needs to keep going for people to come on board. And I think really the bigger that barrier is maybe proportionate to how much opportunity is in the space still. Like, by the time your grandma's using email, it's kind of saturated. Every business is online, and I think that's the state we're in right now. Is we're just about to that point where, grandma's not going to be using it tomorrow, but we're into that point where people with intelligence can actually figure this out without giving themselves a migraine.
But it's also worth mentioning that by the time mass adoption happens, and I know this sounds quite morbid and sad, but grandma isn't going to be here. So like it's going to be people in their third. No, really. But no, but that's how innovation works. Like we're not really trying to teach grandma how to use it. It's the 30-year-olds who will then become grandma and grandpa who will just know how to use it. And to be honest, this is something Elon Musk actually spoke about. He spoke about, and again, I know it sounds really depressing and morbid, but he did say that the good thing about death is innovation, because if the older generation, stayed on forever, there'd never be any innovation or any change. So that's something worth noting.
Look at all the people, Leia, that are making it complicated in the U.S. It's not the 30-year-old, the 40-year-old. All those guys, those senators, Warren Davidson, they're all progressive. It's the Gary Genslers, the Elizabeth Warrens, like
Exactly.
they're in their 70s. Like, of course they don't understand this, and we don't need them to. That I agree with you. It is morbid, but it's true. I mean, this is the generation that needs to be paying the most attention. And long term, I think we will be fine. But short term, it's just really frustrating. It's like back, with the horse and buggy, that's like the banking system, right? The automobile threatened it. So they tried to say you need 3 people, a guy to walk in front with a flag and all this other stuff. It's ridiculous. They tend to, well, we're not actually even regulating in the US, but we tend to almost like overdo it at first. That's like a very big trait of the US is we overdo it. And then we pull back and relax the reins a bit. And I think that's where we're at right now. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I have like a lot of difficulty dealing with really any institutions. As soon as they see that I do crypto, I'm immediately some form of a criminal. Like, and it's literally just because they don't understand it. And it's just really sad, and that's why I think people like us have to continue to just educate and just keep, just showing people that it's not just for scammers and money laundering.
Well, these are definitely the growing pains for any new like revolutionary technology. And the people that say that crypto was responsible for everything that's happening, over the last year. I mean, well, if that's true, why did we see all the same stuff happen 20 years ago during the dot-com crash, right? We had tons of fraud then as well. And a lot of banks went down in the financial crisis, right? Like crypto's not the problem. It's that greedy people exploit new technologies to their advantage because other people don't understand them, and it just takes time, right? It takes years for people to understand it and for people to accept it. So you're right, like and I've had the same issues, trying to find like an accountant to deal with crypto transactions was not an easy task, because most people don't want to touch it because because it's the new scary thing, and it takes a long time for people to become comfortable with it.
It's a tool, right? I mean, right? It's a tool. You can use a knife to, cut some fabric, or you can use it to stab someone, right? You can use a hammer to put a nail in a wall, or you can use it to hit someone, right? It's a tool. You can't just generalize all of cryptocurrency in one negative light just because there are some bad actors. And that would go with anything in any field and any institution of the whole world. Like, there's always going to be bad actors within it, but it doesn't mean that crypto itself is the villain.
Yeah,
I think my Chase account got shut down that I opened in 2014. It was a business account. I had never been late on a payment. I had multiple credit cards I'd never been late on. And second, I was the CryptoLifer, and I didn't even bring that much money out of Coinbase. Maybe up to $15,000. I still don't know the true behavioral reasons for it, and I was never even told. I flew into Florida with my family, and my credit cards and bank account didn't work. I thank God had like $8,000 in U.S. Tether that I was able to send from my hardware wallet to my Coinbase account, and I was able to use my Coinbase card to survive for about a week and a half with my family. I didn't need all that money, but it was nice to know that at least we had something in case anything happened. There's another reason right there that crypto saved my life. If I didn't have crypto that week with my family, it would have been the worst. It would have been the worst week ever. You know what I mean? Like, I would have been taking them to Denny's, or begging for asking my family and friends to send me money to get me through the week while I was supposedly on vacation having a great life. So, I mean, I don't even like admitting this because it makes me feel like people look down on me, or I'm dirty, or something happened to me. But I had lawyers too. I have great accountants, and they all shrugged and said, oh, maybe it was political. We don't really even know to this day. And I was able to go to Citizens Bank and take the check. But imagine this giant check, your entire bank account. And I didn't have access to my money for about 14 days. I was sick half the time in my stomach while I was pacing in the Airbnb I was at, trying to be cool in front of my wife and kids. It was tough. You know what I mean? So they've put us through the ringer. That's why I'm never going to stop fighting for people's, economic freedom, because I know that I'm not the first person that's happened to, and I won't be the last.
Sam, is that how you got into crypto, or what's the story behind that?
I got into cryptocurrency just because I was a gold and silver bug. I was buying gold and silver. I amassed 40 grand of it. All right. I'm sitting in a 1-bedroom apartment in Queens, and I'm saying to myself, what do I do with it? I didn't trust it in the banking, in the vaults. You'd buy gold and silver, they put it in a vault for you. And I'd be like, yeah, in an earthquake, they're really going to not get into my vault. I didn't trust safety deposit boxes with a bunch of gold in there. Technically, they could just dip in there too. So I'm holding my gold, hiding it in certain ways I can't explain. And next thing you know, I found Bitcoin around $500. I was also an inflation bug. I was researching inflation since 2010. And I wanted anything that was a scarce asset, And I was studying billionaires my whole life. How to become a billionaire was basically like the number one thing I would search and read and watch and listen to. And billionaires buy scarce assets, right? Jay Leno has all those cars. Why? Because he has real estate. He has money. What else was he going to buy? He's going to buy 100, classic cars that no one has, because he knows it's going to keep its value. When I saw there was 21 million coins and there was 32 million millionaires in the world, and there wasn't enough for one coin for each millionaire, I was all in. I was like, oh, I'm done. It was $500, and it took me till it was $1,200 to understand the halving and the hash rate and the difficulty level. And then I was all in, and I just started buying as much as I could since that point.
See, I mean, you were an investor from the get-go, but I think a lot of times we forget, most people, I wouldn't say most, but a lot of people coming into this space, they are in it for the gains. They're not really in it for the self-custody of it. They can keep money in their Bank of America and not have any problems with it. They don't think twice about it. So it's one of those unfortunate things where perhaps we do need a little bit of bad news in order to shed some light on Bitcoin. With these, I certainly don't want any banks to fail. That's not good for anybody. But in a way, it's kind of a learning lesson, and sometimes I feel like we all are guilty of ignoring certain signs until it's too late. And I think it's one of those scenarios where it's going to take that, because a lot of people coming into it, they see the meme coin news, hear about millionaires that are made overnight, and that's why they want to get into crypto, and it's not really for the right reasons.
Well, Bitcoin has that morbid reality to it. It's always been a little doomy. It's gotten less doomy mostly because people aren't paying attention to Bitcoin until recently, but it's always been about the devaluation of the dollar, maybe like the world moving global reserve currency. Like it's always had that element to it. And nobody wants these people to suffer, but at the same time, none of us are making these decisions. Like this isn't on us. So this is our option. This is our alternative out of that doomy setup.
Hey, I just want to say what's wrong with Denny's, Sam? I like Denny's.
Nothing wrong with that. I love I love you, George.
Hey,
I think I've only been to one Denny's in my life. No, I didn't mean to call out Denny's. I just the worry and fear of like what I was gonna really do. And I like at that Station 44 over in Sarasota.
Hey, I saw Elio request to speak, so I wanted to bring him on. Hey, Elio, thanks for joining. What are your thoughts overall about? I know we're actually coming to the end here, but I just want to get your overall thoughts, bullish, bearish on Bitcoin.
Oh, I just came up here to say hi, George. I missed you. I only got to see you for a second in Miami. I'm always bullish. For me, as soon as I saw them start bailing out the banks, I didn't put all my money in at once, but I started my buying. I'll continue buying, and that's always been my plan. Is once we see the Fed blink, once we see some new liquidity added, to me that was maybe not the full green light, but an indication of a regime change or a change of policy to a degree. And so I started my buying. I plan to keep buying for the next 12 to 18 months or so. I'll probably go in a little more heavy if there's any capitulation. And I'm always bullish, baby.
You sound like me. People call me, they always say I'm too bullish, but you seem to have the same kind of bullishness as me. Just basically DCA hodl and wait until things recover.
You're definitely way too bullish. No, you're right.
Well, we're coming up. It's been an hour. I just want to thank everyone for tuning in. Today we had a jam-packed spaces. We had a really good conversation. Obviously, anyone listening to this, please make sure you follow all the speakers. These are all the smartest people in crypto, I gotta say. Any closing thoughts? Any of you guys want to say anything as a closing thought? Please do so. Anyone?
I just thank you so much. You're the man for putting this together. Meeting everyone, most of these people here, even just hearing Elio for the first time in the space. Elio, I've been watching you for years. God bless you, what you do. And yeah, man, just keep buying Bitcoin, and we're gonna make it through this. It's the scarcest asset in the world. We got nothing to worry about. And thank you so much for bringing us together, George. This was an amazing time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, George, thank you so much. I do appreciate it. And for everyone that's listening, I personally think that the worst is behind us. There could be a few bumps in the road, but I think at this point, if you've made it this far, especially if you believe in the cycle and where Bitcoin's heading and where we believe this adoption is going to take us, then I'd say you've already gone through the worst part right now. It may be a little bit boring, over the next couple months or so. But I have a hunch that by the end of this year, early next year, we're going to really start seeing things kick into action. And I wouldn't be surprised if we definitely broke, the all-time high next year and probably peak sometime in 2025. So if you could just get through the next couple months, I think we're going to have 2 pretty freaking awesome straight years. So I'm excited.
Yeah, George, I'll second that in terms of just how amazing it's been to connect with you in person down in Miami. Literally, the moment I shook your hand, you're like, "Hey, man, let me introduce you to this person, that person." And I think if we all have that type of mentality in Web3, I think that we're going to be just fine. And thank you to all the amazing panelists. It was a pleasure to be part of this.
Yep. Thanks for having me, George. Mikhail, I'm sorry. I don't think I met you down in Miami. I know I missed Elio by like 5 minutes at some party, man. Next time. Sam, it's kind of an awkward time to say that this space was sponsored by Denny's. I didn't want to say it, but they're going to be mad.
You guys are making me hungry now.
Oh, you dog.
All right. Well, on that, let's conclude. Thanks again for everyone for tuning in. Thanks to the speakers. Tune in again next week, same time, Wednesday, 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Take care, everyone.